Let me see. Let me see. Okay, real life.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
what's visible right now?
Real life. Real life. Okay, sounds good.
Uh,
Okay. Basically,
Everything is good, right?
everything is good. Everything is good.
do we have a presentation or do we?
We just
Start?
have like an agenda. So again, thank you for
So,
joining. So this discussion is going to be about artificial intelligence, the math behind it,
Mhm.
scenarios behind it, and from Ram's perspective, the evolution theory and how it's going to make the artificial intelligence. Yeah, that's the agenda for today. And we'll try to keep it within 30 minutes, but if it exceeds,
So, so we have. If you, do you guys know about the ARC AGI price? So I went. I attended a talk here from those people. So basically, it's like $1 million for. It's a closed benchmark. So there is an open subset of the benchmark as well for people to test on, and then there is a closed benchmark stuff where it's organized by the Kaggle founder and I think one other guy, I don't remember his name. So basically, they'll give you $1 million if you solve like 100% of it with the AI model. So right now, it started with like 15%, like maybe 3 months ago. Right now, it's at like 40%. Somebody has 40% accuracy.
okay.
So it's a closed benchmark because people need to, people game the system, right? So all the models will be fine tuned on that data sets itself. So which is why it's a closed data set. And it's like quite extensive. So for example, GPT 4.0, when they ran it, like not 4.0, the O1, when they ran it, it took like, I think, 1 week or something. So it's like a very big benchmark of like, very human like tasks. So the tasks themselves, they say that the tasks themselves are easy to do for humans, but it's really, really difficult for language models.
how much did O1 score? Like,
It's not on the. O1 is not on the top, so I'll share the link RKGI.
So how do they evaluate the same? Like how?
It's a benchmark of like questions and answers, or like problems and solutions,
So how
puzzles
does
and
that
solutions.
translate to general
hey,
intelligence?
It's like it's a benchmark with a lot of like human level questions. Some stuff that if it. It's not like a benchmark of like general intelligence or whatever, but if something can do that, it has reached like human equivalent parity.
ex machina type stuff.
Ex machina type stuff. Yeah. You cannot differentiate it from human Madri, 100%. Even now, I guess you could argue that, but yeah.
We were discussing like how such AGI, if at all someone like gets it to work, what all implications will it have on like human life, or something we were discussing. What are your thoughts on that?
So for me,
Yeah, I think there are like people who think whomever finds it will get like infinite resources because it can be scaled and made to do a lot of different tasks
like
that humans already
there
do.
will be an economic divide, right? So between people who manage or rather, people who enable the AI. I don't believe like AGI type situation is going to happen. I think part of the reason with the ARC-AGI benchmark thing is that they want to show how truly far away like any AI model is from actually achieving AGI level capabilities. Because for example, Sam Altman or like Elon Musk or whoever has a incentive to overhype all these models, even though they are not really good because they've taken investment from investors. They have to sell their product and gain more money, all that stuff. So when like such a visionary says that this is the only reasonable tech that is available in the world right now, you typically take it with a large grain of salt. So AGI, even if assuming it is even possible, might even be 20 years ahead of time. But what would end up happening is, like, obviously there will be a shift between people who have a lot of leverage. Like, so this is true of like any tech innovation where you start with like so if you assume like everybody has the same resources, the one who uses tech or like technological leverage, like for example agriculture was a technology, writing was a technology, who uses those the most would get like accumulate more and more wealth, and eventually there will be a wealth divide. Right now, with the internet, it was like scalable services, all that stuff. Now with these language models, the divide will be even more higher. But so I read a quote which goes like this. So AI would increase the ceiling exponentially, while it will also raise the floor logarithmically. Like, it will obviously raise living condition for everyone above, but the ceiling for what is possible for a human what is the possible wealth accumulation for a human would also go really, really high. So, it's good or bad depending on whether you're a communist or a capitalist. But
I agree. Like every tech innovation or every new tech that is found obviously gives more wealth to the founder, while also enabling. Interesting.
Personally, we have found ways to control how it's going to be purchased by vast majority of people, and that trickles down education sector, job sector, etc., etc. So basically, they control the narrative that they have. And the ARC-AGI initiative and the benchmark, as I said, a big grain of salt, which is really great. It gives like a validation for again, just like the name benchmark. So, and interesting enough, I saw the KGI introduction page, and they mentioned like capability to learn use case related like inherently and that's the on point. So, basic human capabilities to learn something new or pick up something fast. So achieving that basically, even like in a 2% sense would give the growth really high and also really. But again, that's controlled by these people who use the narrative, the telling of everything.
That's true.
Yeah, like thing is something as simple as ChatGPT or like in general, generative models has created such a shift in how people use or how people think is like really powerful. I think if at all AGI comes in at some point, our entire thinking process and how we use everything will change.
So yeah. You continue. I'm sorry.
I personally think that how people perceive AI right now is just on the level of AGI. Like that's the level of misinterpretation I think common people have while interacting with kids or elderly people who are using ChatGPT. Like they don't know what it can't do or what it can do, but they just thrilled about it, which is like lovely, right? But the capabilities of it, even clients, for example, working around it. So the awareness that these people, by these people I mean the conglomerate, should be in a vast sense in a way where you say this is what ChatGPT is and this is how it does it. But other than that, obviously the marketing piece they use that way. That's also a huge part of the perception of AGI.
I agree. But a better model for me has been that AI versus like the AGI thing is, I feel like ML researchers like to make the comparison that, you know, all all weights are like, neurons, and it's like a human brain, and as the human brain scales. But the most interesting part for me is that, back propagation is not how a human learns, right? You learn it by you just update like one neuron or a bunch of neurons. You don't like
Entirely go through the
entirely
brain
like you 10x your capacity so that you can do back propagation, remember all the weights are, do differential calculus. So obviously these two are not two corollary things, right? So wherever the generative AI models are, it's more like, the way I like to think about it, as like a compression of the internet, right? Like a efficient compression format for the internet, where obviously like any compression format, it's lossy, which is why you get all the hallucinations as well. So for AGI is like, you have to jump a few hoops where we don't know how to jump those hoops yet. So I work with whatever we have right now is not, probably it will require like 2 to 3 more breakthroughs. But right now what we have is like, take a corpus of text,
I mean,
create a
honestly, it's just a machine that gives probability to what the next word might be.
Actually, it's just like, I think of it as just like efficient searching algorithm, but with like reduced accuracy.
Yeah, basically lossy.
Lossy.
So, but there is a line of argument which does make sense. So, for example, Ilya Sutskever is the guy, right, who created this new company. He was the chief research guy in OpenAI. He created a new company. He raised $1 billion for a company with no product. So he's like a very significant. He figured out that he was the founding guy in like reinforcement learning. He's like a really significant figure in all of like the ML itself, right, in the last 15 years. So I liked how he phrased it. So he said, imagine you are reading a detective novel, right? Like there is a murder that has happened. There are like a list of what do you call them? People who are suspicious. There are all these incidents that happened, and then in the final page of the book, it says something like, "and the culprit is," right? So it's also like it's next word prediction, like who the culprit is, but that next word hinges on like so much reasoning within the worlds itself. So that this is the other half of the world where people think just like next word prediction is enough to create a world model of like what the world is happening. How the world is operating. For example, like I don't believe like it's just next word prediction, but it does solve like a debug problem in my JavaScript file where right? Because it does have some concept of like how the JS runtime is operating, how it might fail, all that stuff.
Because it has context, like defined context, defined parts with some hash map that I can refer to and say, okay, it's going to be this, I'm getting this. It's going to be this, I'm getting this. So it has an added advantage of a context or a cache there, but in all essence, it's just math. Is my
It is math. Not. It's like a philosophically different ways of looking at the same thing.
I attended a talk by one of the guys who's on the other side, like who thinks that language models are like they are how basically how human like you can learn more about the human mind from models than the other way around. And his argument was that next word prediction is how humans actually think, and that's how like over the years, like at least his argument was that over the years you learn that saying this in this particular place after this
Mhm.
thing, yeah, like is how humans learn. But I think what he missed the most is like the context and how we switch to it. Like just language, like just predicting the next word doesn't make sense. You need some more like sort of knowledge on where to use what word. It's not just about which word comes after it. That's
If you say
hmm.
like
Hmm.
RNN, let's him just say the next word with the context.
Exactly. Huh.
So you give it in a context all the corpus itself. It's going to choose or dispute the probability or calculate the probability in that sense. So yeah, that's really important. That was missed by the one.
Yeah, even here, like, okay, when learning, we learn in RNNs, we learn word by word. We go one by one word. Instead, we now have transformers that can understand the entire corpus, right? But generation still happens word by word. I don't know, like,
No, it does make sense what Ram says, like at a philosophical level. Say you go to a comedy class, right? So, obviously comedy feels like such a fundamental human thing. It's hard to capture all that stuff. But you go to such a class, a workshop, and then you realize like, there are like maybe, 15 different ways to frame a thing. You have like, setup, and then you have a punchline, and then you have, you wait for the audience, and then you chain them together, and then now it's like a comedy skit, or like, you start low, go high, go start high, go low, so those are all just like patterns, and how you do that is actually just next word prediction. Like for example, you start with like a median case where you say like, I was at the grocery store, right, and then there was this guy who came in, and then you say you can either go high or go low, and then he was a billionaire, or he was like just not wearing any shoes, or and then you just yeah. But what I was trying to get at was that even capturing human emotion is like, it feels so hard, because even for us humans it's not obvious what human emotion is, but it does conform to a pattern, and it is just like you can describe human emotion with just next word predictions. Like, so when you're predicting the next word, you're not just predicting how does that search work? I don't remember the name of the search after. So you're not predicting just the next word, right? It's like, it's somewhat of a misnomer, because what you're doing is like predicting the next, predicting the probability distribution for all tokens, and then you're kind of. I'm so bad at this. I forget what.
You're picking the most likely maximum.
No, even if with top P, right? Even with top P, there is a search. I forget the name. There is a search that is run so that you can kind of string together all the tokens. So basically, you pick this. So the way I think I implemented a toy LLM for a course, and that is how I feel. So it's like it gives you the log distribution for each token, and then you're kind of stringing together them by figuring out the most optimal path. It's a optimal path problem, where they try to figure out what is the maximum log probability that I can connect each of
Like a
them.
heuristic that finds out most optimal the calculation.
It's a graph search problem. So basically, after the log distributions are created, you solve it as a graph search problem within those log distributions. I'm not sure what it's called. I'm sorry, I don't remember it. But yeah, basically what I was trying to get at is that even though it feels like only predicting the next token, it's actually thinking beyond that, and it's also taking the context of whatever comes, which is how we talk, right? Like when I started this whole conversation, I had an idea of like, okay, so explaining comedy because it's like a human emotion, because I can relate that back to whatever Ram said, because it's like it makes us understand human emotions as well. That's true, because it ties the past and the past tokens and the future tokens, and then something in between happens.
Nice. Sometimes it feels like ChatGPT has taken too many, stage presentation courses in its response.
Yeah.
Okay, there's one other thing that I briefly wanted to discuss. So me and one of my friends, we were discussing like the total entropy of information that is there on. Let's take the internet. So total entropy that's there on the internet. Now with all these generative AI models, people are just generating content, right? Does that mean the data that is available or the data that is being produced, like novel data that is being produced, is it reducing over time or is it staying the same?
It's
If that makes sense. I think that is this is very relevant because basically all of these AI models, they are not generating new information. Nothing new is being generated. It's just reformatting and like massaging the data, right? But ideally, if we do have AGI, it should be able to like produce something new to the already existing information pool that we have, or the entropy that is already there. What do you guys think about that?
With the existing information from the internet or whatever is fed into the machine or the LLM,
Mm-hmm.
you give it proprietary data or personal data or data that you have it in a private system, and this in essence is going to create more private things. So I'm not sure about the entity part that, but within the publicly available sets that if you're discussing on that notion, then I'd say it's like rephrasing, paraphrasing. If you count that as different, and then to my understanding.
My thing is, let's say news, like we get new news every day, right? That is considered new data. But at the base of it, the news is not even though news providers use LLMs, the new data is being generated from human actions and stuff. If that makes sense. Like,
I have a two-sided take on this. So I was involved with like synthetic data generation project, and there is also one other anecdotal, like a couple of anecdotes I have. So one thing is models trained. So synthetic data is just like data you generate from more data, right? Like using a ML model, whatever. A model fine-tuned on synthetic data could better perform in certain tasks than like a generic model, right? Although it was the generic model that generated that data itself. So that raises an interesting question. Is it like, so if there was a bigger model that generated that data, it should perform better, right? It does not, because the data. So this is a problem only if you think of ML as like a data in, data out types of problem. But what the model is realistically trying to approximate is how generalizable it is. Like I feel like that is what all ML models should be. How generalizable for a given scenario a model is. That is where it's more important. Not so if it fits perfectly to your data, it's called overfitting right? So you're not, so only if it is overfit does it exactly correlate with the data itself. If it is generalized, a really good model with a really good algorithm would generalize well enough that whatever it creates is like novel. Or for example, or like talking about novelty, like think about how human research happens, right? You have a bunch of ideas. You start with you start digging deeper into a research paper. Now you hit bottom. Now from there you figure out like 15 different ways of progressing from there, and then you pick the top 3, right? So that is how novelty is. In that case, I guess a LLM could create novelty within like a well-known for a human.
Just like how you mentioned the generalizability of LLM, so how will you, how is it translated on so the data that's being produced by the LLM or given by the LLM with the human age concept, or how is that even translated?
I think, anyways, the LLM, we can fairly say that the LLM understands language in a sense, right? So, I don't know. That's the big question, I think. So it already understands language, but it doesn't get the
It gets
what's
no.
the huh.
I feel like it gets more nuanced than a lot of people I've talked with. So
Yeah. No. In
it
terms
has
of language,
generalized well.
absolutely. Mm.
It has generalized well.
Again,
Right.
subjective is my thing.
Subjective, na? Like how?
Subjective. It depends on how you're going to interact with that LLM. It depends on what motion you're going to
Mm.
interact with that LLM. If it's going to give you something novel or not.
That is the base of my question. Like, if you have a piece of news, let's say about someone, like, then you ask the LLM, you give it that new information, and it's basically just doing a formatting work. It's not adding anything new. If that makes
Yeah, that's how humans operate as well. Then no human is novel as well. Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Not even editorial, like, developer, like, the scientists, most scientists. So as long as you're not working on fundamental stuff like, like math, logic, physics level things, it's some form of like, so any engineering I feel like we feel like is novel, and LLM can also do it at the same level of novelty. It can build its own like it can build its own language model that definitely it can build better than me. And if I ask it to do a variation of it, replace relu with a new function, I'm sure it can come.
I do have an interesting question that so what sort of math foundation would you, or a modeling situation where ideally something is going to learn something new, can we formulate in the context of AGI and AI? We need to touch base on the math part of it, obviously. Has there been any research that you've heard of in this aspect apart from the benchmark?
I'm not, even if I heard of it, I'm sure I thought it was stupid and moved on because I'm not smart enough to recognize it or understand it. But maybe I don't, I'm too skeptical whether that is even possible, because so you have so many thoughts in your head, you convert that into words, which is already, you've lost like 90% of the data that you already, 95% of like everything that you already thought about. It's a lossy medium already, and then you're taking that lossy medium and then you're trying to create a world model, like an ML model with like a world model instead, which is like, it can approximate but it will never be accurate, right?
One thing that keeps me up at night, I know certain concepts people formulated mathematically modeled enough to talk about randomized algorithms, to talk about queuing theory, to talk about Brownian movement, to talk about AND colony optimization. So it's so varied. I'm struggling to find something, if anyone's done in this aspect, if this sort of get the foundational work for math. I mean, for sure people have. I'm sure on it, but then to an extent, how would it happen is what it sounds very interesting to me. And if that actually happens, then yes, we may learn to make the LLMs learn to acquire new skills. In the sense of biochemistry part, like Ram was saying, his lab does 3D cell printing, some sort of. I mean, if we see that aspect, it's like a building block. You feed to the building block and it builds on it, right? Or it prints on it. So can we model that? In my opinion, modeling that building block itself is a computational feat or marvel wherein you give that machine the ability to print a human cell. I don't know if I'm at this point talking nonsense, but I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of get what you mean though.
All this stems from research is already being done, like the 3D cell printing. So that in itself is a notion for starting on a building block. Have you come across something like that? Like both of you, other than this cell printing?
So this is how I think about it. Like, human population is like a bell curve, and I'm at the exact center of it. So, probably, I mean, beyond, I can maybe understand like plus or minus 10% where I am, but beyond that is just magic. What you're asking is in the 0.1% of like, so it's like so beyond my comprehension. I can't even, because like I'm struggling at my level. I'm struggling to even understand what.
No, but you piece it so beautifully. So it's not a struggle and it's not a. And how does this like? So I believe that you have an extensive entrepreneurial knowledge. So how does this AGI like fit into the next 5 years into the entrepreneurial journey of AI or AGI? How does that begin?
Good question. So, I mean, so it's not what do you call it? Discrete situation where at least the one we are existing in right now is not like discrete enough that this is like pre-AGI, post-AGI type situation. We are very much still in pre-AGI, and I'm assuming we'll be in pre-AGI for the next like 20 years or so. As I said, like maybe it needs like 2-3 breakthroughs, which I've not heard of or I don't know yet. So as it gets to mainstream, we'll get to know about it, I guess. But yeah, right now how it has impacted is just like some tasks which were previously thought impossible are now possible. Like for example, taking like a huge wall of like unstructured data and then converting it into structured data is now like much more easier than before. Like regex is I hopefully someday regex is a thing of the past where you don't have yeah. And another thing is so obviously I've seen a lot of startups in that space. Nowadays it's also possible to have like powerful agents things I've seen. But as with all ML problems, they're all flaky. They do some, but in some cases though, there are like some jobs I've heard of where like 100 million agents have run through the internet, sorted all those data. You made it more usable. Created more knowledge from it. But these tools are just complex enough that it's not accessible to the regular person yet. Maybe it will in like 5-10 years, but right now you do like something with AI, LLM, Gen AI stuff, you get paid like the entrepreneur. As much as I like to think of like, especially in the software SaaS B2B B2C type situation where I live in, it's more of a showmanship than anything. So I mean, it's just saying that you provide the cheapest, coolest tool for the cheapest price. Where I haven't seen any AGI thing. I think maybe the companies you speak about are like so far ahead of me that I can't even imagine, because these companies are the ones that have like hundreds of thousands of clusters of GPU. They have like, they are those. There are companies I know who are doing like this. I was just reading about a model which was trained distributed. It's a 10 billion model, which is the biggest. It was trained on a distributed cluster across the globe. Like it was not in a single data center. It was trained like distributed, which comes with its own problem, right? Like for example, I don't know if you guys have read the Llama report. Like most of the white paper, what it goes through is just how hardware fails and how communication is a big barrier. So one of the reasons that NVIDIA is like really big is CUDA, obviously, but they also have a network backbone which is the most reliable. So I'll also like a link.
Is it specifically for like training models?
Yeah, basically. So I've only trained models that are like 1 GPU big, but when you go like beyond 1 GPU and then go to like hundreds of thousands, so GPU can fail like in between, and then inter-process or like inter-GPU communication becomes the biggest bottleneck. So solving those problems, I mean,
AI can never get.
people who are doing those would have more, I feel like would have exact answers for these type of problems, because I am not even able to comprehend like at that level. So one of the things that the Llama report goes through is that they expect like 5% hardware failure, and then every cluster they bring up, they have to stress test it for like a couple of days. Like the GPU run at maximum level for like 2 days. They call it something burn-in or something, burning, GPU burning or something. So they just make sure that stuff. I don't know why I went into this tangent, but basically what I was trying to get at is like people who are doing engineering at that level would I would definitely. I guess that's where ideally, that's where we want to move towards. But it is quite cool in that area. I agree. But next to it, okay. So this is the other half that I want to talk about. All models, to Ram's thing, like since because of AI slop, people call it, because of AI slop, all of the internet itself is dying in some sense. So that you cannot. There is a group of people who think training on top of like AI data is bad versus good, depending on who you ask. But there is some level of like model convergence that is already happening, where like either because these companies are competing and training on each other's like input output pairs, or
I see.
or because like so for example Claude, OpenAI, I read a report where it said all these models are have reached parity. Like I think Andre Chapati tweeted it, saying that was something he didn't predict, that all models would kind of converge onto the same level, because these are different companies, right? They are using like a different data set, but because of like bleeding over, stealing each other data, all that stuff, it kind of starts converging. So that is, I guess, one answer to what you asked for. I went on a
Interesting.
winded.
I also feel it's kind of happening in stages. So initially we did with text only, and then we did with DALI and such, and now we're dealing. So in and another inherent flaw of ChatGPT particularly is it cannot understand or analyze any image embedded in a document or a specification. So that is the next step, I feel. So you inherently make it understand a document rather than you stripping the text only or the image only, and then it goes on to understanding all the aspects on its own rather than making an agent do it, like writing another API or function doing it. So that's like the next stage that a natural order goes on. So I'm not sure what's above that stage, because if it can call functions on its own, like write a function on its own, then call that API, use that API, and sort it. You don't have to hard code that function into LLM's settings, or give it as a function there, or a function calling aspect there.
Interesting.
That's true. That is true. Quite a mess it is everywhere, but I'd say like some promises have been fulfilled, some promises have not been fulfilled. But definitely for me, like personally, software development has become a little less easier.
So I'm
Okay.
part of a research collective thing. So there was an interesting presentation that happened. So basically, a group of researchers came up with an AI scientist where they basically prompted it saying these are the novel approaches that we have in our head. You can start saying novel approaches or start skewing novel approaches that you think of, and you can validate if it's within that scope. They entirely prompted. And then the next part of the scale is to you give it a sample code, it's going to generate based on that code, and the next part is going to evaluating those results and come. So I asked like question, like for any researcher project that we hop on, there'll be a lot of iterations involved. There'll be, in a human way, I'm saying, there'll be a lot of iterations involved. There'll be a
Mm-hmm.
It's not feasible anymore. So how would it handle that, I asked. And he mentioned they're just assessing the quantity of papers it produces rather than the quality. So my
Mhm.
another question was, but why? Like, I know it's something to start with, but I'm not able to comprehend so as to, why aren't they thinking on that aspect? It's so interesting to, to listen to all these ideas. They want to develop an agentic AI kind of thing, but
Mm-hmm.
but the point of it is not to spew the e-papers rather than just one paper. Like the optimization part there. Like he mentioned they're working towards it, and he didn't mention how they're working towards it. But it'll be really interesting to learn how they're working towards it. But yeah, that's another topic, another call. But yeah, what's the point of all this? Another question that I have. Like the inherent point of all this, apart from aiding regular life, like aiding editorials, aiding software development, aiding all that. Like, why does this need? Like, apart from entrepreneurial questions.
Hmm. I have a take on this. Maybe biased, maybe stupid, but I feel like general AI can only, like, it can't come from existing data, if that makes sense. Like, it should evolve naturally, because it has, like, generalizability has nothing to do with data, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, like, just like how evolution brought neurons from basic cells to neurons, and then, like, we had different divisions of it. It evolved into each other. It started interacting with each other for us to perform different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think AGI will only work if it evolves from something very basic.
Can it identify that message? If
Yeah,
it
that
identifies
is.
message, then yes, like AGI will
Mhm.
definitely evolve. But
There are evolution-based algorithms to.
I know,
Mhm.
but yeah. So my argument is that evolution-based algorithms will be the.
start.
Oh, yeah, that is where we should start.
So,
But
the- so they take, like, obviously for obvious reasons, like they take like a lot of compute and a lot of years to get there, right? Like,
yeah, that is true. That is true. Compute power will be, like, enormous for those.
so. So you need breakthroughs like that. Like, for example, one of the coolest thing I read about was like Andre Karpathy and, I think one other guy. I think it was Ilyas Utskiver or something. They figured out you could use a GPU to train a ML model in 2017. Like, it's just two people.
Wait, that was in 2017.
Yeah.
Yep.
So before that, you could not train a model beyond the CPU's capacity.
Nightmare.
And it would take like days, weeks, months, whatever. So just two people on a hackathon, they figured, like, so there are these GPUs which can do massive parallel
Computation.
processing, and they kind of rewrote a lot of like matrix multiplication things into like parallel algorithms. That is how, like, you could take these, like, really and then they bet that, I think that hackathon was about like how to train some model, and then they bet how fast can you train it, and then they bet everyone by a mile. But that was only as early as like 7-8 years back, right? So the what I was getting at is, like, obviously for evolution based algorithms is the way. It's like you're right in that, but some type of like computational jump like that needs to happen before like people start thinking about all these, like, so GPUs were never designed for deep learning, right? They were designed for graphics processing, right? So you need somebody like, some prodigy type people who are like operating at that level, who can like
Someone who can turn the miracle order.
Hopefully, it's not a AI scientist. Okay.
Those people who are like at the forefront, like who can. I mean, I went through like his implementation of LLM.c. Have you guys went through it? Karpati is like a really good educator in like
He has his own
language models. He has a project called LLM.c, which implements like training, backprop, and inference for a LLM model in like 1,000 lines. So, I mean, those people have like true understanding of what computer science is, as well as like true understanding
what
of
happens under the hood.
machine learning is the equation is everything. They'll do some breakthroughs. I mean, I guess we just follow on. Maybe, I mean, we can try our best to understand those things. I can understand, I cannot like create that. My token.
If we are capable enough to understanding it, I mean, we should be novel enough to ask questions. I think the other side of that, like, stuff. So, yeah, but we, personally, I cannot think of the level of handling that, I don't know. But yeah, open to understanding.
My next token prediction is not at that. But it is I can share LLM.c. It is a really cool project, I think.
Has his own platform to advocate and teach about LLMs. I've heard about LLMs. And on talking about C, I really feel C is like a bit of programming on LLMs or programming on anything that has any computer power. I haven't heard about any other language like this. You guys haven't taken
I don't know.
I
Like,
have.
I mean, you had to have like coded on it like professionally too. I don't know. It's
But I saw memes wherein like Nvidia selling shovels and all the open air, even though they're doing great, but it's Nvidia who's the biggest winner.
That's true. That's true. Like,
That's the unpredictable. I think Elon is following on that because he just got like 100 crazy amount of GPUs just for his compute. And that's like the best move ever.
Yeah. I think like it's going to be a pattern in the future as well. So Llama, even the they have like 100,000 clusters. Llama 3, 4 or 5 billion was only trained on like 10,000 GPUs. So it's not even like scaled to the level of like you can add like maybe 2 more zeros and that's GPUs available for that. So we can see improvement, maybe we won't, we don't know.
Ram, I have a question for you. So again, being bit of a it's like mind-boggling to me. How did they actually make the machine do that? Like, what sort of math?
I haven't delved too much into it, but it looked similar to a normal 3D printer in the sense that it had similar hands and stuff.
So
So
it's like a blender.
just like a normal, I think so. I don't know. But you can control what sort of cells go in and stuff. So it's really complicated. I can do some research into like what sort of printer that is, which company manufactured it and stuff. Yeah, it's a
Backdrop, like mitigating the backdrop. So I don't know how the human anatomy works, how it generally works, how the brain works. But we do have something, we do feel something when there's some hormone like chemical changes wherein you're dealing with something new, your adrenaline picks up and all that's happening. So again, just like how we called it synapse in the neuron and started from that artificial can this also translate somehow like to having the base of or like introduction to biochemistry?
I don't know. Good question though. Yeah, I mean we are not
understanding the human process will definitely also fast forward the AI learning process, but I have very less,
Like,
very less knowledge on that. So
But that's so cool to, I mean,
it is, it is.
well then.
Hmm.
And if I
It
I
is.
don't,
think like basing everything on human is like a maybe fundamental flaw. Like you don't have
That is true.
yeah, true.
if it is going to
But
be
but
a human, it might not follow a human.
but if you think about it, like at the end of the day, we like humans are going to use it, right? So I think it kind of makes sense to base it on humans.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is a
Even if it's
interesting
not
thought.
basing it on humans, it's humans who are going to optimize it, at least in the start.
Hmm.
So it will
Mm-hmm.
be within the comprehension of how humans analyze or behave. The humans it will eventually.
Hmm.
I guess so for the beginning at least.
At least, yeah.
But I mean, I'll say like human results will be the benchmark, but I'm sure like even today's standard, an off-the-shelf LLM can cover like the 40% of all human, like the bottom
Yeah.
25% or 40%.
And I think
I'm not saying this as a demeaning thing, but like with
No, but we orchestrate those tasks better. So that's where we differ, right? Like in education.
no, that is the thing. So if you have a AGI system that I don't know where I heard this, but if you have a AGI system that actually achieves the performance of a, like, I don't know, maybe a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, that in itself will be able to take over a lot of things that we take for granted, like that, because that can be multiplied without any limits, and it can work 24/7. So you basically have a array of, let's say, 1 million new people that are trained for that, like that can generalize, that can do all of these new things. So all those 1 million humans that were already there will be replaced, or they become obsolete basically for that particular thing. So I think it's like a, yeah, this circles back to what we were discussing at the first, like what sort of social implications, what sort of economical implications it has.
yeah, economical implication for now at least it's obvious, right? Like
Hmm.
you have more capital, you invest more in this direction, you gain more capital. Goes on
Yeah.
further.
I mean,
And then
yeah, economic capital, I mean, this is a hot take from me. In the education sector is also massive. Like, the amount of colleges in India, especially Tamil Nadu, that come up with things like AI or PhD AI, and they just flood these weird different things, and they advertise as in we give a lot of opportunities in AI just to get a piece of 5 lakh for 1 year. Like 5 lakh rupees for 1 year is like mind-boggling to me. And the amount of crash course companies that we have in India is like mind-boggling. Not just on Udemy or Coursera, but legit companies who do art like 8,000 rupees, 7,000 rupees to learn all this, like to learn to make a substantial difference in the AI and ML. Is like the gap is so big. The gap is really big. And if someone cannot that's where I feel the awareness should jump in from the companies like Meta and big pharma, the rich ones, wherein they have to say borderline give a holistic view of how this is all functioning in a capitalistic world. I mean, it's all, obviously Meta won't do that, but Meta or any company on that
No.
won't do that. But there has to be some kind of awareness in that aspect.
We are in too earlier. We are in the very early phases of AI in use, is what I feel. So it's natural that everyone is creating hype and no one actually wants to, like, create proper awareness. But eventually it will be there. Eventually someone will have to step in, and
But
then
probably
yeah,
this is how people would have felt for the boom of computing.
yeah, exactly. That's what happens for every boom.
Yeah, there will be, see, economic man, right? We're all just here trying to make a living by adding some value to someone else's life, right? If a school or a college or a educational institution comes here and says like, I am providing this value to your children and like or whoever, and then some people find value in it and come there and like exchange money for like the value return. Obviously it is overhyped. Obviously the person who's selling is going to say this is the best thing since sliced bread, but that is so, so one thing is like the companies who are going to accelerate are going to accelerate irrespective of the collateral damages. That is how all of humanity has been. We never thought about the rickshaw drivers, or like we never thought about the horse cart pullers when car came in and obliterated all their livelihood, right? So when with societal projects there is going to be collateral.
Creating an awareness, you kind of like, but in the name of creating like a hype, not a hype, you fail to create an awareness that okay, these are the things that is possible, these are in scope in the route.
No, but my thing is the companies that actually create hype, it's not their problem. They can do whatever. It's the person. Like I won't say it's the person's responsibility. It's whoever who's going to teach it to the next generation. It's their responsibility. In mind.
Well, how can you be aware? Like, are you so? How confident are you that there will be a overarching? There will be no need for coding anymore. You can just ask it and it will come. How confident are you? I feel like it might happen. Like I am like tossed up between like 40% it might happen, 40% it might not, 20% I don't know. So awareness is a thing that happens like from a top down like hierarchical system. You cannot be aware of something that nobody is sure of. Everybody is just surmising, right? You cannot be aware. It's like somebody's driving a train. The awareness is on the person who's crossing the pathway or like trying to board on the train. It's not the person at the helm of the train to decide whether it should like go slow because people might not be aware. I think that's a fundamental difference between how we think in India versus like how I think I'll say UK versus like the US, where people accept collateral damage, where people say the onus is on you. Why drugs are open here, everything is open because the onus is on you. Like you are responsible for your life, which is something different than like the UK, where for example, no ML model that has been released recently has been released. Like for example, Llama 3 is not available because they take a awareness first approach, where they say like we will regulate it first and then only allow it. I find it kind of demeaning because you should trust people to make the right decisions for their own life. I mean, it's just philosophical differences at that moment.
About the awareness that main analogy that we gave, so the course that I did back in 2017 was just 2 years old. It was available only in 2 colleges in the whole of Tamil Nadu, and they were not ready to give that course as a B.Tech or an M.Tech. They only categorize it under arts and science. That course is now rampant across all of colleges as B.Tech. And the point is, how I heard the word course is like totally bothered. So my father got to know it from his friend, school friend, who is at Stanford, and who suggested that this is up and coming, put your daughter in. And my father suggested that to me, and I had no absolute clue of what that meant, what data science even meant, but I ended up this. So as you said, the awareness trickle down from the people who have the context of what's happening to people who don't know if it's existing or not. So
Now it's available to the masses. There is no wrong in it, right?
my point is, like the awareness first approach, I feel that is much regulated and better because you have control of, or you know what's actually happening down there rather than just blindly going for it. I get
But
trust is
but
important. Trust is important for innovation, everything, but that in itself in starting should be regulated somehow so as to come to reach a point.
no, the thing is, if you keep regulating everything, you won't get more people in, if that makes sense, faster. So the more people that actually know about this, the more the field will grow.
It's
The
so
more you'll break,
the
you have
problem
a
with
chance of breaking.
regulation first is it reinforces however the society was already. It solidifies however the society is already. Like for example, you know, just being born in or like having access to Chennai and Coimbatore or like whichever big city in your state would reinforce that you would get to go because it's regulated and only available in like 15 different
Boundary,
days. Once you,
philosophical boundary.
no, not philosophical, it's a communication boundary where only people who are in those 15 colleges have access to those knowledge, have access to that thing, and then which like in some sense it will just make the wealth
But
gap
instead
more
of basing
significant.
that regulation on the region, can't the regulation be based on the technology? And the regulation part, I mean,
At that point we are just discussing finer details. It does not matter whether they're regulating the uh, origin or like whichever way you regulate it, because it's like a whack-a-mole problem. You cannot regulate creative, like the way I like to think of the human population is like we are all like if have you seen that fungi that finds path to in a maze? We are like that. Obviously some is going to be like collateral damage, but it is up to the person to be aware of it. Read more, do more. Do not trust the government, do not trust the authority or like
instead of being in fine print, can't it be in like bold print? Like if we give that context to us, at least in educational sector, I feel the on you part would be less because majority of the people are middle class people who make a living out of it as we discussed. So kind of personal beef I feel for myself. I know it cannot be like regulated or made aware to the entirety of the world, but if that's a solution I personally I want to work on. I put in effort to work on it, but it's so much more out of my hands and I'd like
create awareness for these type of things. Like, so when you say, I want to understand, what do you mean awareness?
So the current industry does not work with AI as much as they market that they work with AI. The current industry does not work with ML as much as they market that they work with AI. So an average person who takes that crash course would end up being a full stack developer or a backend developer or an API developer. That's the maximum that person could. Even in a college setting, even if out of all the batchmates that I have, two, three people who work in code, who work as a actual ML researcher, actual ML developer. So that's the type of awareness that I want people to hear. Like, so awesome that they're willing to, study or pursue AI or pursue ML. But I feel it shouldn't be just for the hype. It should be for they should know what they're getting into. So
No,
I feel it's
I
not a part of education institutions, the government, the board of education institutions wherein they create these courses or approve these courses. So there's an idea of what those children or what those young adults get into, so that they don't feel frustrated when they get into the market and get in this rat race forever. And only a few percentage of people have the privilege and have the fortune in their hand to get out of the cycle to pursue what they really want. So
no, my thing is, see, you quoted three people, right? Even if those three people get into the field because of whatever, like because of the awareness that these guys are giving, then that's a huge win, right? You get three more people, yeah.
I agree, but the population of entirety is not going to be that way, right? You have to.
That will be there. That will be there.
See, I have a. Yeah, I understand. So,
People out of else take computer science. There's no difference between AI education and computer science. Like,
So
No, no,
I just,
I have no, no. I understand. There is like that is the same way for everything. There is only limited seats in like top institutions. There's only
no,
limited
I'm not
seats in the
talking about
industry.
top
There's only limited.
institutions.
Everything
no,
is
no, no. Okay, okay. First, I'll tell you. Like, so I like an analogy that my grandmother says, right? So it's this. It's a story about like how five blind men, right? They are trying to understand what a elephant is, and then one guy is looking at the, touching the legs and saying like, you know, it has like, legs that are like pillars. And there's another guy who touches the ear and says like it has like a huge ear that is like, big taller than me. And then there is a different guy who's looking at the belly, looking at the tusk, all that, right? So what I mean by that is like it's a perfect metaphor for how we understand the market, the population, where humanity is going, where we are going, where we exist, right? For example, somebody within an institution like, who's only been worked in say TCS, right? They wouldn't understand, a timesheet-less, responsibility-driven operation. It's just not. So for them, HR is the ultimate, power holder who will say what you can and cannot do, right? You come out and see, a different person who's like, an entrepreneur, and then he's just running around doing random shit. And then eventually they do land up somewhere and then they get rich or whatever. Right? So what I'm trying to say is nobody knows. Like this is such a patriarchal thing that we have ingrained where we assume we know what is the right thing to do. Or like more than that, actually the most difficult part for me is like more than understanding what I know is true, we assume we know what is right for them to do, right? Right? We are not like, it's like we are all blind men. We are all looking at the same thing, but we are observing different things, right? We are all, it's the same entity but different observations. So it's impossible, which is why regulation won't work, because no one entity, the government, private or nobody cannot, understand the bigger picture because we are all living in our own different contexts. So
What I mean by awareness is the whole of elephant put on the
which
table
nobody has. Nobody has. It's a five generals problem.
Yeah.
Nobody has it.
But I get what you are trying to say. But someone has to show the elephant. Like this is the entire elephant. You pick what you want to, or you pick what you want to see.
It takes more than a lifetime to understand the elephant. Even then, it won't be enough because it's so huge, it's so complex, it's always evolving, it's nuanced. It's like, something that was relevant 5 years ago is not relevant anymore. Will it be relevant? Can you say something like full stack developer will be relevant 5 years down the line? I don't know. I don't think so. Like Claude can generate whatever app I ask for it. Like it's just a question of like how much more context right now.
Yeah.
Maybe it will generate a backend, deploy it, provide me with my own custom application every time I ask it. So, which is why I think like, because once you start regulating it, it becomes a status quo, and that is what everybody would follow. It's just not. Yeah, it's. I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, interesting. I like we'll discuss this further. I think.
Mm-hmm.
This is an interesting topic. I know I get flipped comments like I frantically tired thinking about all my bodies. But yeah, it's really interesting. Thank you for your time.
Yep. Same.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Thank you, guys.